Oh, this David, bro. He really said, let me go for the Palisade. Yeah, use your dead hard. Wait. Wait, that was the weakest dead hard I've ever seen. My man said, He said, That was an old man dead hard. Bro, he said, What the f... That was weak as hell. Oh my god, this ace tried to go for it. Alright, man, so it's time to have a Dead by Daylight discussion. Now, I don't want to talk about the garbage Halloween event that they just put in the game. I don't want to talk about the glitches and bugs in the game. We gotta talk about this meta. This Ruin and Undying meta. Now, if you play this game and you're at red ranks, you've probably seen it just like the rest of us. You see Ruin and Undying on almost all killers in almost all of your games. Now, the reason why you see it so much is because it's really strong right now. But then that brings the question, is it fair? Does it need to be nerfed? So obviously we all know what Hex Ruin does. If a survivor lets go of a generator and the Hex is up, then the generator will regress automatically and the killer doesn't need to kick the generator. And now that they've added Undying, if you cleanse the Hex Ruin, it can move to another totem until you cleanse all of the totems or until you get the Undying out of the way first, and then you could get rid of the Ruin. Now, as a killer player, running these perks has been super helpful because it gives you, as the killer, a lot more time to go on chases and you don't have to be as stressed about the generators. As long as you can keep the survivors kind of off the generators, you know they'll go down at 200% like Ruin does. But as a survivor player, it's kind of annoying to have to go against Ruin and Undying every single game. Plus, some of these games, it could take you cleansing literally all 5 totems to get rid of that, and you have really like, well, if you're searching for totems for that long, you have no chance at winning the game, like, let's be honest. So a lot of people are saying that this combo needs to be nerfed in some way. And I agree, I definitely think it needs to be changed. But I actually saw a great post on Reddit, on the Dead by Daylight subreddit, that kind of summed up what the real problem is here with this Ruin and Undying meta. So big shout out to memecuckboy. That's a name. Big shout out to him for making this post. But he titled it, "The Ruin and Undying meta is a band-aid fix for an issue with the core gameplay mechanics and is bad for the game's health." Now, when you get into this post, he says a lot of things about the problems with the game's mechanics. Primarily, he talks about the biggest issue facing the game, which he says is not that gens go too fast, but it's that killers don't have the tools to reliably apply pressure. I definitely agree with this point because we see with the Ruin and the Undying meta that it's a lot easier for killers to apply that pressure because all they have to do is go run towards survivors and keep them off the generators. And when they do that, they know that the generators will regress. Now, Ruin by itself is a strong perk, but once you add in Undying, it gets way, way, way stronger. Honestly, at red ranks, it's basically impossible for a killer without using Ruin and Undying, or if they just use Ruin and it gets cleansed, it's really, really hard for them to pressure generators and keep survivors off generators. It basically means that you have to be having super fast chases and you have to be all over the survivors at all times. Now, he also talks about the actual objective of the survivors, which is doing gens. And in his words here, he says doing gens is mind-numbingly boring for a survivor. Holding down one button until you win is anti-fun. So making gens take longer isn't really a solution. A lot of people say that the gens go too fast, but it's just not true, because no one, when you play survivor, just wants to sit there and hold M1 the whole game. It's not fun. The most fun part of the game is the chase. So if you were to make generators take even longer than they do now, like you said, it would make survivor gameplay just even more boring than it already is, and it's already kind of boring. And then he starts to get into the generator regression, which is also an issue when we're not talking about with Ruin. So he brings up some exact numbers. The generators regress at a rate of 0.25 charges per second, and survivors repair at a rate of 1 charge per second. So basically that means, since the generator takes 80 charges to repair, it takes the survivors 80 seconds to do a gen on their own. And that 0.25 charges per second regression, that's when a killer doesn't have Ruin and they kick the gen. That's how slow it's going down. So basically he says that if you kick a generator as the killer and then you leave it for a full 80 seconds, so a full generator of time basically, the amount that it's actually gone down will only take the survivor 20 seconds to redo. I think that's a huge issue with killer right now, because honestly most of the time, especially at red ranks, kicking a generator just isn't worth your time. If you don't have pop, or if you're not using any generator perks, kicking is just a waste of time, because you really get nothing out of it. Like he says in his post, when you kick a generator, you get locked in this animation for a few seconds, so you're not going on a chase. You could lose the survivor while you kick their generator, and the speed that it's actually regressing at is super slow. So basically you're doing nothing really to the generator, and the survivor either gets to run completely away from you and not get in a chase, or the chase is going to take you super long, so you got to catch up with them. So basically kicking a gen is useless. I honestly think that this is a pretty big problem for the killers, and I think that there probably should be some sort of bonus built into when the killer kicks a generator. So we know that Pop Goes the Weasel takes a sizable percentage away when you kick it with that perk, but I think that killer kicking it on its own without a certain perk should still give them some sort of regression bonus. So let's say a killer kicks a gen without any perks, like no Pop Goes the Weasel, it should automatically take like 10 to 15% regression off of that gen. I don't know if 10 or 15% is enough. I'm not a dev. I don't really know the exact amounts, you know what I mean? But maybe it could work. Anyway, he ends off his post by basically saying that Ruin Undying is kind of becoming necessary now because it's kind of the only way to pressure the generators effectively at red ranks. I think the most important point here though is the issue with the actual mechanics of the game. For survivors, sitting on a generator the whole game isn't that fun, and for killers, there's nothing they can really do to stop that unless they run these certain perks, these certain meta perks. So I think there needs to be a switch up in the gameplay mechanics. I think that survivors need a secondary objective. And a lot of people have been saying this for a long time, that survivors need a secondary objective. And some people try to say that totems are, but I don't really agree with that. So a potential idea that I had for a secondary objective for survivors would be that they have to go on some sort of like fetch quest where they need to find parts for the generator. So instead of just sitting on the generator the whole time, they need to run around the map and maybe find parts and then put those parts into the generator. I wouldn't say change the sitting on a gen for 80 seconds. Maybe you still need to sit on the gen for 80 seconds. But maybe before you can start doing that, you have to find a specific part on the map and put it in that generator. Maybe each generator has one part that's missing that you have to go find. This would make survivors be running around the map more, maybe would give them a bigger chance of running into the killer, and that would make the game a little more exciting for both sides because the killer can randomly find you more, and you can randomly run into the killer and get that fun side of the game, which is the chase. Like I said, that's just an idea. I don't know if that's the perfect solution, but it's something just to switch up the game a little more and make it not so boring. I also think that Undying on its own should get nerfed. I think Ruin is fine where it's at, but I think Undying should be nerfed a little bit. Everybody has the same ideas basically about that. You know, if you were to cleanse the Ruin and then it switched to another totem, if you cleanse the Undying after that, that Ruin should disappear since you already cleansed it once. But anyway, I thought that this post brought up some good points about really what's wrong with the game right now, kind of what's wrong with the base mechanics, and kind of how it needs to change. Most games have a meta that gets stale and needs to switch up, but this game might have some problems that are at the actual core of the game that need to change. If you have any ideas about what could be changed with the meta, with these perks, or even with the base mechanics like I was trying to say, leave it in the comments down below. And if you have any thoughts on my changes or my potential ideas, let me know, because I know they're not perfect, but they were just kind of off the top of my head. Anyway, go run your Ruin and Undying before they nerf it. Have fun with that, because you know it's coming. You know they're going to change that real quick. You know they're going to change it. I don't know how they're going to change it, but they're going to switch it up. So go use it while it's still there.
Difficulty.